Shall we begin?
All right, I want to thank everybody for joining us here. This is the Riverkeeper Roundtable, and this is Friday. This is the end of Earth Week, so this was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and so all week we've been kind of celebrating and sharing news and photos and things to commemorate that. And we wanted to close it off here by giving folks an opportunity to see what our Riverkeepers do, and our folks right here. They work together across state lines in Georgia and South Carolina here, and we've got 3 adjacent watersheds, and so we want to bring everybody together and give you all an opportunity to ask some questions and to find out more about what they do and to dig into what's going on. So without any further ado, thank you for joining us. And because of the storms and some of the things that have been going on, we're going to kind of start with the southernmost and then move up to the north and do some introductions. So Damon, if you want to give us go ahead and start and give us a little introduction about you and your watershed, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Tommy, and thank you, Tanya, for organizing this. So I'm Damon Mullis. I'm a Riverkeeper and Executive Director at Ogeechee Riverkeeper. Our mission is to protect, preserve, and improve the water quality in the Ogeechee Basin. And I want to pull up a map of it shows where our basin is for those of you that may not be familiar. So the Ogeechee Basin starts up in Greene County, just below Athens area, flows southeast down to the coast. The northern end is the city of Savannah and down to McIntosh County. There's some misconceptions about what riverkeepers do, and we're, that we're only concerned with the river, and that's not true. So we not only work on the Ogeechee River, but also the Canoochee, as well as all the streams and tributaries in the basin, as well as the groundwater, which we all know is important for drinking. Wetlands, coastal marsh, and so really all the waters of the basin we work with. Let me take this down here. How we implement our mission, we have 3 big areas. One is we operate as a watchdog. So we review permits, do water quality monitoring, surveillance. We encourage and push the regulatory agencies to take action and follow it to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. The second big category is education and outreach. That's where we teach and educate the public about the threats to our water resources and how to improve water quality, and also what they can do to help that. That kind of includes citizen science projects like Georgia Adopt a Stream and things like that. And then a third big category is advocacy. So that's where we lobby our local and state elected officials and really push for smart environmental rules and regulations. So that's kind of a quick introduction of Ogeechee Riverkeeper and our mission and how we try to fulfill it. And again, thanks for everybody for tuning in. And I guess I'll pass it back to Tommy.
All right, well, thanks, Damon. And we'll move to the next watershed there connected to the Ogeechee, the one in the middle of all of these watersheds from everybody joining us today, and that's the Savannah Riverkeeper.
Hi, I'm trying to figure out how to pull up this map, so hopefully I can figure it out. I'm Tanya Bonatadabas. I'm your Savannah Riverkeeper. We watch over the Savannah River, which is a 400-mile-long river. Let's see if I can figure out how to share it. No promises. I'm not real good at this, as we discovered earlier. Where did it go? All right, there we go. I have no idea how to do it. I can't do it. If I share the screen, there we go. You have to work with that, I guess. So there's the Savannah River Basin. It starts in North Carolina. It is the state border between South Carolina and Georgia, 400 miles long. It's a really interesting interesting river in that it's disconnected in many different ways, South Carolina and Georgia being the most obvious, but the top 200 of the 400 miles are lakes. So it's got a complete lake type economy and way of life. And then when you get below Augusta to Savannah, it becomes a free-flowing river again. And so it has everything from the largest lake east of the Mississippi River to the third to fourth, but we've dropped down lately, but largest port in the United States. So it's multi-tiered, lots of different uses. We work, so Savannah Riverkeeper, we work under 3 cornerstones: restoration, protection, and education. Restoration, we cleaned up over 9 tons. I'm going to get this number wrong, but a whole bunch of trash last year. And we certainly did not do that with just 7 staff members. We do that with all of our lovely volunteers throughout the basin. From an education standpoint, we do hundreds, if not over, definitely hundreds of speeches, interviews, doing everything we can to keep people educated and what goes on in the basin. And then from a protection standpoint, if you come after our river, if you try to hurt it or contaminate it, we will come after you. And that's something we're pretty proud of. So one thing real quickly I wanted to update you on that I'm really excited about is the Supreme Court made an awesome decision yesterday. So in Hawaii, there's been a question throughout the United States of whether a direct discharge into a stream meant that a pipe had to burst and then dump directly into the stream, or if it could go into the groundwater and then the stream itself. And the Supreme Court very, very wisely chose that, yes, in fact, that is clearly a direct discharge. The reason that's important for us is we've been suing Kinder Morgan since 2018 over a 360,000 gallon spill. And this decision, we won in court. The Kinder Morgan appealed it, and it made it all the way up to the Supreme Court. So it was with Hawaii waiting to be seen. But because of this decision, we think that we now have the teeth, hopefully, to really hold their feet to the fire, because it was a 360,000 gallon spill. And now there's still over 200,000 left. So we look forward to getting the rest of that out. Anyways, I'm sure my time is up. So I'll turn it over to Hugo next.
Okay, let me unmute myself there. Hey, y'all, I am Hugo Crispin. It is my pleasure to be your Edisto Riverkeeper with Friends of the Edisto. If you're not familiar with the Edisto, one of the things that we like to say is that we are the longest free-flowing Blackwater River in North America. We're also the only major South Carolina river system, one of the 8 watersheds in South Carolina, that lies entirely within the state. The Salkehatchie might also be able to claim that, but I'm the Edisto Riverkeeper, so I'm going with it. With around the 300 miles of Blackwater streams in the forks and the main stem, it's actually about 310 miles. The river winds through cypress forests and bottomland swamps, salt marshes, and estuaries, has a rich variety of habitat supporting wildlife, recreation, and potable water. It's the longest completely undammed or unlevied Blackwater River in North America, and we do have some tributaries that are dammed to create farm ponds, but the main channels remain free-flowing from source to sea, and we think that's something to be both proud of and to continue. The Edisto Basin drains about 3,100 miles of South Carolina. That takes in 5,000 plus stream miles, including creeks and everything, about 11,500 acres of lakes and ponds, and about 20,615 acres of estuary. It rises from spring-fed tributaries just above the fall line and then goes all the way down to join the Atlantic Ocean, about 310 river miles to the south and east of those headwaters. We can talk some more about it later on, but one of the things that is interesting to me about working in this watershed and being able to get out and learn more about it is we're only about 5.5% urban. You look at a river like the Savannah, it's got a lot of development along its banks, and they have a lot of challenges that the Edisto really doesn't have. They've got the big dams over on the Savannah. We don't have that. So while we do a lot of the same things as river keepers in terms of fishable, drinkable, swimmable water and working for better policy and law that affects our rivers, really we do it in very different contexts and settings. So we work a lot together and we work a lot to support each other, but we also do a fair bit that is unique to our watersheds. I think that's probably a decent introduction to the Edisto. I will go ahead, though, and share a map. Since everybody else gets to share a map, I'll do one too. Here's my map. And as you see, we start right at I-20 across South Carolina. The river goes generally southeast until it gets to Gibbons Ferry State Park. If you've been there, there's a big marl bluff there. And so the river hits that marl and bounces almost due south then and goes out to Edisto Island. We have a lot of stuff going on in the watershed right now. South Carolina is in a multi-year state water planning process. And as part of that, they're doing watershed-based plans in each of the 8 major watersheds. Because we had been in the news with water planning issues starting in about 2013, they chose to make the Edisto River Basin first out of the box with doing a basin plan. We have now been informed that the Edisto River Basin Council has been brought together in pursuit of that river basin plan. We were supposed to meet for the first time this month. However, as you may have noticed, we ain't doing a lot of meeting right now face to face. And the folks at DNR in South Carolina who are charged with doing the water plan feel like this is an important enough process that they're going to try to wait until we can meet face to face. That River Basin Council brings together about 25, 26 people from across the spectrum of stakeholders. And there are some competing interests there. We feel like probably meeting face to face is a way to keep that from becoming more fractious than it needs to be. I feel like I've filled my 5 minutes, but if you want me to keep talking, just point at me and I can do that.
All right. Well, thank you all for those introductions and for getting us up to speed on where these watersheds are. And clearly you can see from the maps how these things all touch each other. They're all adjacent to one another here throughout our states of Georgia and South Carolina. And so I kind of want to open this thing up with a question. Of course, you're all side by side, and you know, Hugo just talked briefly about working for better laws and working with those legislative aspects and water planning. So how is it that water keepers work together? And so your watersheds all touch one another, but you don't necessarily do all the same things or face the same issues. So how is it that y'all can work together and address those issues over such a broad area of land?
I think Tanya's probably the senior member of the firm. Tanya, you want to take a run at that one?
Well, I think Damon's going to go first. He's about to jump up there.
All right.
Sure. I'll go ahead and speak to that. So in Georgia, Tanya and I both are really involved with the Georgia Water Coalition. And all 9 water keepers in Georgia are actually involved with the coalition. And it's a broad group of environmental and lots of other groups involved. They're interested in clean water. And we really focus on state level lobbying and legislation. So this year, for example, our priority issues were we wanted to fix the trust fund issue in Georgia. So an issue in Georgia, there's a tire fee and lots of other fees that are charged at different times that are supposed to be designated to go towards cleaning up hazardous waste sites or tire dumps and that sort of stuff. But what has happened over the years is that money ends up being allocated to the general budget and isn't used for what it's collected for. And so that's an issue we've been working on for several years. This year we got a win in Atlanta, and that there will be a ballot initiative in November to change for a constitutional amendment in Georgia. And so we're going to be gearing up to do informational campaign to educate Georgia voters on what it means. So come November, make sure you vote yes for, we're not sure what number it'll be yet, but it'll be a trust fund initiative. So at the rate Georgia was cleaning up its hazardous waste sites, I think the estimate was it would take over 200 years to get them clean. So they really needed this money for that designated use, and Georgia voters are going to make the final decision, and we feel confident we can get that in. Another priority issue is coal ash. So coal ash is a big issue nationwide and also in Georgia that we've been working on lots of different things around coal ash, storage and dewatering, landfills, and also stream buffers. So, we've been working hard to try to get our stream buffers protected again. So due to a court ruling years back, we lost a lot of our protections for freshwater streams. And as a coalition, that's been one of our priority issues to try to get that back. And that's really important to cut down on erosion and sedimentation, which is a big pollutant in the state. That's the type of legislation we push for and advocate for, but then we're also there to fight rollback. So, right now we're really fighting hard to keep Georgia's right to farm law intact. So what's happening now is they want to change Georgia's right to farm law that will basically kind of invite big, large industrial hog farms and that sort of thing into the state. And if you go to Ogeechee Riverkeeper's website or Georgia Water Coalition's website, you can find a lot more about our priority issues and some of the rollbacks we're working on. The legislative session, we just learned recently, is going to come back at June 11th. They have to deal with the budget. There's 11 days left in the session, so it's going to be a whirlwind. And a lot of these things, budget's going to be priority, but we anticipate that they're going to try to push a lot of bills through. So we're going to be there at the Capitol lobbying. We'll be pushing out lots of information. So during that time, people that are interested in water resources and clean water, please get engaged and contact your legislatures and take action. So that's probably the group or coalition or the way the Riverkeepers in Georgia really come together and work together most commonly.
So I have two real quickly that I want to talk about. The number one, which is absolutely my heart, which is Waterkeeper Alliance. So there are 360 keepers throughout the world, over that actually, and only half of us are in the United States. So Hugo actually has a history in China, so I think some of this interests him as well. But working throughout the world to, in half of us, enforce the Clean Water Act and making sure that our waters are fishable, swimmable, and drinkable. And then for the other half of us, a large majority trying to actually have a Clean Water Act. And some of the exciting ways that can work, Savannah Riverkeeper, we get to work with Bangladesh and Nepal a decent amount, more often Bangladesh. And one of the things we do is help amplify their issues out. Just to be honest, Asia works well on shame. So if we can help highlight some of the issues. But another exciting thing actually that Waterkeepers just pulled off not too long ago, or I guess less than a week ago, and it was also the Chinese keepers were able to get a large shipment of PPE equipment to Bangladesh, but they did not have the cover or the cost of the transportation covered. So individual keepers were able to come together and cover that cost of the shipment. So I think it's an awesome example of all the keepers working together to do something that really makes a significant difference. Because honestly, a lot of our international keepers are far more involved in the COVID than us. I'm hiding at my house. That's what I'm doing. So they're on the front lines. And the other one is actually a really exciting project that Damon and I are working on together. And I wish we're going to pull Hugo in the future. And it's a seed grant. It's a Georgia EPD grant. It's through the Water Planning Council. And the task is a pretty simple but very complex one of putting together all of the sample spots that exist in the two river systems in one place so they're accessible. Seems like something that would be relatively easily found and easy to do. Turns out it's not. It involves a lot of Excel spreadsheets and learning ArcGIS. But it's really exciting. So the idea is that we're creating a website and an app where you can easily figure out what real-time monitoring from federal, state, local, and citizen science is being collected. You can assess those spots and be able to tell what's going on with your river. So we have everything from EPA data all the way down to the swim guide data that we collect in the office. So we're approaching a third of the way through. So those on the water planning councils, you guys will be seeing actually our report and our suggestions here very shortly. But I'm excited about it. I think it's a really good example. Damon is far more of a scientist than I. I'm a shit talker. That's what I am. You give me good ideas and I'll spin them. But having Damon and being able to work together is super important. Our other partner actually is Finnissy Swamp, which is out of Augusta. So Hugo, I'll let you go next.
All right. Thank you very much, Tanya. One of the things I'd like to bring into the mix here, it's a priority for the Waterkeeper Alliance. I know that there are a lot of keepers working on it. Our compatriot over on the Congaree, Bill Stangler, did a dam removal on Congaree Creek actually last year. You hear a lot of people talking about dam removal. We are working here in the Edisto Basin with our friends from American Rivers and also SARP, which is the Southern Aquatic Restoration Project, to identify these dams on tributaries to the Edisto that are blocking biological movement up and down those tributaries. Dam removal can be a sensitive topic. We are going out to people who have these dams in South Carolina. Dam safety really became an issue in South Carolina in 2015 after the flooding that I think we had 80 dam failures in the state roughly. So they have asked us to do some outreach to landowners who have dams in our basin who may have problems and haven't really thought about the possibility that removing those dams, if they're not useful anymore, may be something that we can help them find the resources to deal with those problems and remove those dams. It's a win ecologically, it's a win for the landowner. And you'll hear people saying that, dam removal is kind of a fraught topic. But the way we're approaching it right now with this set of dams, we think that we have a real solution to what could be a serious problem for some of these dam owners. And just if you're out there and you got a dam you want to talk about, hit me up. In addition to that, I talked a little bit about the water planning issues that we have in South Carolina and that we have going on in the Edisto Basin. In 2014 and 2015, the Edisto was named one of the most endangered rivers in North America back to back. And it was because of surface water withdrawals happening under the 2010 Surface Water Withdrawal Law in South Carolina. The deeper we delved into that issue, the more we came to recognize that it's going to require legislative fixes to really get to the root of a lot of the issues that we have. So I think that you're going to see, once we get through the watershed planning and the state planning, ideas emerging from that are going to get translated directly into legislative initiatives. And that's where our work as advocates in the State House is going to be important, because to make really effective water policy in South Carolina, we're going to, at the bare minimum, have to get buy-in from a broad group of stakeholders. And there has been a lot of very adversarial interaction over this issue. Like they say out west, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting. And, we are trying very hard to build positive, useful relationships across that spectrum of stakeholders so that when we do make water policy, we make water policy that can actually move through the legislature. And we have, core beliefs that we're not going to be able to shift on. But in terms of what we can do a lot better than we've been doing. And more to the point, we can do it without having a gun to our head. We can do it before there's a crisis. Right now, we have a fair bit of water in South Carolina, and we have options in how we're going to manage and use that water. We need to make good decisions now, because it's hard to think of an example, but if you don't plan ahead, sometimes the unexpected happens and you're dealing from behind. Hint, hint, we're all at home. So, probably at this point, a lot of the not smaller, but more granular issues to do with water policy in South Carolina are coming under this one big umbrella of the water planning process. But it's vital to recognize that when we do this water plan, we're going to have a lot of great ideas, but nothing changes until those ideas get implemented either on the legislative or regulatory level. Beyond that, always picking up trash, man. If you want to go out and pick up litter with us, come on out and play. We good there?
All right. Thanks, Hugo. Appreciate that. Thank you for all the answers. Hugo, thanks for bringing up dam safety too. I know, you mentioned 2015 and even just within the last year or so, right here on both sides of the Savannah River. I know we've had a couple of dam failures and some things like that with some of the smaller dams and you're right. It has been an issue for a few years now. I have a very interesting question that came in from the Facebook live feed, and I'm going to hold on to it for just a second because it ties into another question that I want to ask you all. But I do want to give you a time limit on the next question, just for a little bit of a challenge. Not saying that any of you are long-winded or anything. But I want to ask you what is unique about each of your watersheds. So we've talked about the things that bring you together and the things that you do together. So I think it would be important for somebody, maybe who's not familiar with Waterkeeper or with any of the Riverkeepers to kind of hear your perspective of either one of the things that you love the most or what's most unique about your watershed. So I want to give you each, I'm going to say 3 to 5 minutes. Try to keep it 3 minutes if you can. Just kind of put it in a unique package because I know you all have so much to say about everything in your watershed, but I want to hear what's really special about each one of your watersheds. And I think if we go in the same direction that we went in from the very beginning, Damon, can we start with you on that one?
Sure. So what I think is special about my watershed, similar to Hugo, the Ogeechee and Canoochee rivers are free flowing. There's no dams that regulate flow for hydropower or anything else. So we have a natural hydrology, which is pretty unique in these days. A lot of rivers have been dammed, and a lot of this discussion has turned towards dams. And in our time and in this area, that's probably one of the things that make it less impacted than many other basins. Another thing I think very special about the Ogeechee that I don't think the Edisto can claim is we're one of the few rivers that drains into the Atlantic in the region that hasn't been invaded by the invasive flathead catfish yet. So the Ogeechee and Canoochee are known for their great redbreast fishing, and the flatheads really do a number on those. So we're really fortunate and feel that's really something special about the Ogeechee is we don't have that problem, and we hope to never have it. That's a thing that fishermen that don't know any better, that want to catch them, move around, and it's a really, really bad idea. And I think that's one thing that keeps our basin special and such a great fishery. the hydrology and natural hydrology really creates really wide floodplains on the Ogeechee. So when you're out on the Ogeechee or Canoochee, you're secluded and you really, feel like you're in a remote area, even if you're not, even though a lot of our watershed is rural. So in this time, in this era, in our region, I think one of the most special things about my basin is, how pristine it is relative to other basins. And hopefully I didn't go over my time. I'll turn it over to Tanya.
I think you did really good. I think for keepers, we're doing really good, honestly. So what is unique about this Savannah? So she is as schizophrenic as I am, unfortunately and fortunately. I guess it works out well. But she's the only mountain river out of the three of us here. So she starts in Cashiers, North Carolina, Nantahala National Forest, and then is the home to the Chattooga, which is, if you've watched Deliverance before, that's our claim to fame. It's also a wild and scenic river, so it's our only national wild and scenic river on the Savannah River, but it is absolutely amazing. So I think the thing that makes us unique and that I love the most is that our job in the river is trying to get Elberton, Georgia, and Hilton Head, South Carolina, to understand that they're in the same boat, right? So I get to work with all these vast different types of people who look at the river in completely different ways. The lake people certainly do not see the river the same as Savannah. I can promise you that. In fact, even this shirt, Savannah River, get into it. I grew up in Augusta. I still live here. We all go out on the rocks, so the last remaining shoals. If you were drinking illegally from Augusta, that's probably where you did it. Still to this day, probably. But it just makes sense, right? Savannah River, get into it. This shirt has always been real popular in Augusta. I wear this in Savannah, and I get funny faces. People are like, "Get into what?" Like, what are you talking about? Well, you can't swim in the Savannah River. It's a 48-foot river basin with third largest port. So it's really, I think that's what makes us unique is we are just very diverse, up and down, very rural to urban, mountain to sea. All right, here you go.
All right, before I talk about the uniqueness of the Edisto, I will say that I got deep love for the Broad River, which is a tributary to the Savannah. I grew up in Madison County up there, went to high school in Danielsville, and lived half a mile from the Highway 172 bridge near the Rooster Tail. If you ever paddled the Broad up there, that was my backyard growing up. Caught a lot of fish out of that hole. So yeah, great love for the Savannah. Also, in the days when I fancied myself a whitewater kayaker, I swam significant portions of the Chattooga. So there is that. How come everybody else gets their picture up, Tommy, but I don't? What's up with that?
I'm not sure, Hugo. I can see you just fine on my screen.
I'm not seeing me, but I'm fine with that. That's okay. Just so y'all can enjoy me. The Edisto is unique in a number of ways. I was joking before we started, but differently unique from the Savannah and the Ogeechee. The Edisto is, as I said, opening up, the longest free-flowing blackwater river in the United States. One of the things that is just absolutely stunning to me every time I get out there is you can get on the Edisto and get a bend or two away from the put-in, and it's primordial. Unless there's a house on the riverbank, it could be 1,000 years ago. It would have looked like this. It's, the basin was timbered fairly significantly in the 1800s, but by the turn of the century into the 20th century, logging had pretty much happened through the river basin. In fact, they looked for a while at straightening portions of the Edisto to improve barge and timber traffic down the river in the aftermath of the Civil War, and came to the conclusion that really the logging industry had moved out of the river basin and was up on the highland surrounding it, and it was really much more efficient and effective to transport that by rail to where it needed to go rather than by river. So 1800s, we dodged a bullet of river development. And subsequently, times were hard in South Carolina through a lot of the 20th century. And so the Edisto, being mostly rural and mostly swampy, did not get a lot of the developmental pressure that other watersheds around have received. I know that we're on the clock here, so I'll just wrap up by saying, one of the things that threatens this unique character of the Edisto is changing land uses. When you look along our watershed, we have at the moment a number of people operating sand mines. And when you look at the permits for those sand mines, what you see is that they're all going to become lakes and grasslands. Well, before I moved to North Georgia, I lived in Central Florida. And you know what happens when you got lakes and grasslands and people want to move to your state? They build subdivisions around those lakes on those grasslands. So if you're thinking about maintaining the unique character of the Edisto or of the river that you love that is currently in an undeveloped state, think about those changing land uses, because people are coming. They're coming because we have water. They're coming because we have space. They're coming because we're less expensive than where they're living now. And if you care about your watersheds, you need to make sure that those watersheds are protected and that you're watching what's happening in terms of development. Because changing land uses are going to be an emerging issue, certainly in my watershed, and I think probably in various ways for other folks who do what we do as waterkeepers. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Hugo. Thanks, everybody, for those answers. And that actually is a great segue into kind of next question. You were talking about usage and people. So people use rivers differently, and that can be geographically or culturally specific, depending on where you are around the world. Maybe it's for agricultural purposes, or maybe people hunt and fish or something like that more. Maybe it's industrial, or maybe it's drinking water. So if you could really quickly, each of you, and Hugo, we can go back to the Edisto and then work back down Savannah and Ogeechee and go the reverse direction. Tell us a little bit about how people use the watershed and what kind of activities you really see most often on your rivers.
Happy to do it. Well, I mean, first of all, I do want to circle back to something Damon said a minute ago. Flathead catfish. We are not in his fortunate position of not having flathead catfish in our watershed. We actually have supported a few flathead beatback fishing tournaments on our watershed, trying to get some of them out of there. Last year at our spring event, we had the weigh-in for a flathead beatback tournament. The winning fish there, 74 pounds. So we got flathead catfish and we don't want them. Damon, you can have them. I'll bring them to you. No, not having it? Okay. So I'm sorry. What was your question, Tommy? I lost the thread there.
It's really about the primary uses that you see.
Yeah, no, I'm back. So primary uses, we see a lot of recreation. We've got hunting, we've got fishing for sure, but we see a lot of boating. I mean, we see a lot of paddling and more of it, with people coming from not just across the state, but across the country to paddle the Edisto. You have everything from tight, twisty, blackwater, creaky kind of stuff. At the very top of the South Fork, we have actually a couple of little ledge and pool, probably class 2 kind of drops. Seen people actually swim out of their boats there last year, in fact. And then when you get down on the main stem, sort of around, say, the Colleton State Park and Gibbons Ferry State Park, down to about Highway 17A, the river's bigger for the most part, and people will do a fair bit of motorboating down there, a little bit of skiing, I guess. You will see people out there in jet skis, but lots and lots of paddling. And also we have some outfitters who put tubers on, and they do a lot of sort of social floating, shall we say. That has created some tensions between user groups, because the tubers want to go slow and the boaters want to go fast. And so we're continuing to try to get people to collaborate so everybody can enjoy and use the river safely and in an appropriately sensitive fashion. The other thing that I will say about uses of the river is it's not all recreation and fun. If you look at our river, Orangeburg takes drinking water out of the Edisto. The city of Charleston takes drinking water out of the Edisto. And upstream of both of those water intakes, you have the water treatment plant at Batesburg-Leesville, which discharges into Duncan Creek, which discharges into Chinkapin Creek, which is one of the two headwater streams for the North Fork where I live. And over on the South Fork, at the very head, you've got Johnson, and their water treatment plant backs up into the headwaters of the South Fork. So we have also Aiken taking drinking water out and also putting treated water into the Edisto. So it works on that basis, and it also is a working stream in that we have a number of licensed discharges from all sorts of users, including industrial users down around Orangeburg. Those things are part of the reality of watersheds in our time and place, but there are also things that we have to be aware of, have to keep an eye on, and have to work with to make sure that the bad effects of those things are mitigated, and that hopefully as we go forward, again, we make good policy that protects what we have so that we're not just enjoying it in a unique time, but it's here for future generations as well.
All right,
I agree. So the Savannah River, the different ways that we use it. So there are, I believe, still 48 industrial and municipal outfalls in a 200-mile section between Savannah and Augusta. So, and then when you go up, you have the big reservoirs. Sorry, I moved up from the south there. But in the big reservoirs, most of that is for recreation water supply. So it's also a huge water supply, and then also flood control. So the Savannah is a very big river, and a big portion of how it is used actually is keeping it from keeping flow going all throughout the year so it can provide what it's supposed to, and also keeping us from washing away when it starts raining. That has been very important this year and a couple of times before. The other, we have a lot of recreation. Again, it depends on which part of the river you're on. If you're way in the headwaters, your kayak's about this big, and you're working all the way through the rapids versus the lakes where you have the big motor boats. These guys, lots of bass fishing going on. And then once you get below Augusta, which is by far my favorite part of the river, that's where you have motorboats, you have kayaks, you have a connection, but you have people that live off of the river far more, I think, than any other stretch. And that's the Sylvania, Estill, Allendale, that whole area, all the way down to Effingham and then Chatham. Yeah, so there's lots of different uses, a lot of industry. We are the workhorse of the Southeast. Maybe, well, I would say that we even beat Charleston, honestly, in terms of how much, like Savannah River site, Vogel, we have the only nuclear power plant to expand in over 40 years in the United States. So a lot of our economy in both South Carolina and Georgia are heavily reliant on the river, and that's actually one of the biggest conflicts that we run into is who gets to use the ability to pollute in the river to generate its income.
Well, from listening to you guys, I will say that the Canoochee and the Ogeechee River proper is fortunate not to have quite as many negative uses, I would say, of the river. We only have one industrial discharger on either of those rivers, and that's on the Ogeechee. We have no drinking water intakes, which is really fortunate for that. We're drinking water intakes obviously don't add pollution, but one big issue in our basin is the amount of water. We've had a huge drop in average flow in the river over the last few decades. There's lots of reasons for that I will not go into for time, but low flows in a blackwater river can really impact water quality. So the more water you can keep in the river, the better. I know Hugo struggles with that in his basin also. As far as uses for the river, mostly recreation, so mostly paddlers, fishers, different when you get along the coast, but we seem to be talking about the river proper uses. There are some municipal discharges for wastewater treatment plants that we have. But overall, it's mostly used for recreation, and we don't quite have the impacts from industry that most other basins have, and which is fortunate, because we can really focus our attention on the ones we have. We do have some industrial dischargers on the coast that are discharged into some tidal rivers and creeks that we pay attention to, and then also Milliken, the industrial discharger on the Ogeechee. Is always our laser focus after the fish kill in 2011. Since I've took on this job, that being a watchdog on that facility to make sure that never happens again has been my top priority. So I'm fortunate I don't have the 40 or 50 that Tanya has to watch over. But yeah, so mostly recreation.
All right, so thank you all for those. And it's time to kind of move to a little bit more of a fun question. And this one comes in from the Facebook Live feeds. This comes in from a good friend of ours, Donna. She wants to know which watershed produces, as we all know, clean water is necessary for good beer. Which watershed produces the best beer? Now there may be, don't everybody answer at once, right? But let's see what y'all got.
I will only say that of the three watersheds, I believe at the last regional Waterkeeper conference, beers from the Aiken Brewing Company did better than anyone else's. I'm just saying. I mean, if you want just unbiased information, I'd say it'd have to be the Edisto. But maybe I'm biased.
Well, I will say the Ogeechee watershed has some really good breweries. Two Tides is one of my favorites. That's in our watershed, and also Eagle Creek and Statesboro. But I'm gonna jump ship a little bit and say Moon River, which is actually just over, not in my watershed. It's just a few streets in the Savannah watershed. Is my favorite. So I'm going to vote for Savannah on that one.
Yay. This is the most exciting question ever. Thank you, Donna. So the Savannah probably has the most because it's so long. So I think my personal favorite right now is Savannah River Brewing. They came out pretty hot. And I like their different mixes of beer. And now actually one of their owners is a board member. So I might be obligated to say it.
Well, if y'all don't mind, I'd actually like to chime in just a little bit on this one too, because I have been all throughout all those watersheds. Two Tides, I love. I do always love Two Tides. I do really like Moon River a whole lot. And there is another brewery there in the Savannah River watershed up close to Lake Hartwell called Southern Heart that I've not gotten to yet. That once we get all these coronavirus things lifted, I really want to go try them out. But I'm going to have to throw my hat towards Aiken Brewing. I mean, Aiken Brewing Company, that's home to me. I went to school there and spent a lot of years in Aiken. So that's where my vote would go. I'm going to give this back to y'all. We're right here. We got 7 minutes left until we're supposed to wrap this up. So if you want to say a quick goodbye, throw anything out that we have forgotten or anything else, then go ahead and wrap us up.
Hey, I'm going to jump in because I want Hugo to tell the story of kicking ass in Orangeburg.
Oh, the chemical story. We cannot leave without the chemical story, Hugo.
Okay. Well, I wish I could claim a lot of credit for what happened here, but basically what happened was there is a chemical called pentachlorophenol, and it's known in the trade as penta. And penta is used as a preservative for wood, mostly these days in utility poles and railroad ties. And internationally, penta has fallen into disfavor because it's incredibly toxic and polluting. And in fact, Mexico is a signatory to an international accord saying that they're not going to make or use penta anymore. So the only place in North America that made it is in Mexico. And they announced that they're closing that plant in 2021 in accordance with their international obligation to do so. And there is a chemical company, Gulbranson Chemical, which currently operates in Orangeburg and by all, evidence, seem to be good corporate citizens and all that. But they decided that they wanted to start making penta because there's a market for it and it would have been profitable. And so there was some initial information that came out that they were intending to do this thing. And I just, for so many good reasons, it was a horrible idea. And the minute that we started letting people know that this was happening, people recognized, hey, that's a really bad idea whose time has not yet come. And so there was a fair bit of press coverage. I shout out to both the Orangeburg and Columbia newspapers for their early and thorough coverage of this. And as we began to let people know what was happening, and as more was learned about it, there was apparently a great deal of input that was coming back to Gulbranson themselves, the chemical company in Orangeburg. And they, after about a month of this being in the wind, actually in an interview with the T&D in Orangeburg, announced that they had changed their minds and that based on community input, they had decided that they were not going to create pentachlorophenol on the banks of the North Fork of the Edisto in Orangeburg, for which we are both profoundly grateful and extremely happy. And thanks, Tanya, for giving me a chance to talk about it.
Well, I'll jump in really quickly just to say, if you're interested in learning more about Savannah Riverkeeper, please visit us, savannahriverkeeper.org, or Facebook. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, you found us already. So check us out. We do a lot with citizens. We've not been doing a lot of cleanups or sampling right now, mainly because I'm scared of COVID. But when we will get back out there, and we have a lot planned for the fall. So I hope to see you at either one of our cleanup events. Come learn how to sample, or maybe come eat some oysters with us in October.
Yeah, so also, like Tanya, to find out more about Ogeechee Riverkeeper, please visit our website, ogeecheeriverkeeper.org. You can find out about a lot of issues we're working on, lots of other cool features like a recreational mount and stuff like that for so you can plan your trip out on the Ogeechee River. And I just want to mention one other thing. During this pandemic, this is going to be important for all water keepers and anybody who's interested in our environment. One of the biggest fallouts from this pandemic is going to be the budget crisis that is going to hit our states probably harder than they've ever been hit in our lifetime. And when the states, South Carolina, Georgia, or any of them, they're going to start cutting budgets. They're going to have to. They can't print money like the federal government. And when that happens, your EPD, your DNR, a lot of your regulatory departments or agencies are the ones that get hit hardest. So our work is probably going to be more important than ever moving forward. This crisis is going to impact everybody, every organization for years to come. And what we do as watchdogs and protecting our natural water resources for everybody to enjoy and have clean drinking water is more important than ever. So please consider donating your time, energy, effort, whatever you can do. We email you by contacting your legislator, whatever you're in a position to do. I know everybody can't give money, but we need your support. So please consider getting engaged and helping out. We're gonna need it moving forward through what's to come.
I'd like to say amen to that, and also I'll jump in with the Edisto Riverkeeper Friends of the Edisto website is at edistofriends.org. One of the few benefits of the COVID social distancing situation is I am currently in the throes of working with our social media and web folks to redo our website and update everything and integrate Edisto Riverkeeper into the Friends of the Edisto website so that we have an appropriate placement there. So that you can find all things Edisto in one easy-to-find one-stop shop. For the day-to-day stuff, please come see us on Facebook, Friends of the Edisto, /Fred. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate being included in this. Looking forward to getting back out there once the current unpleasantness subsides somewhat. And I guess somebody other than me probably needs to wrap this deal up.
Yeah, I got you there, Hugo. So thanks, everybody, for joining today. Big thanks to all of our river keepers out there who are fighting to keep our waters fishable, swimmable, and drinkable. And so, mind you, you have to abide by the CDC guidelines right now. But go fish, go swim, go drink. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you have a great weekend. Happy Earth Day 2020.